Hello, everyone. Good morning. We are just going to give it a couple of seconds so we give folks enough time to log in over here. I usually say hello, happy sunny day, but it is a little gray over here in Los Angeles. I don't know where in the country you are joining us from. Hopefully, it's a little sunnier there, or who knows, maybe you have a little bit of snow over there. If this is your first time with us, hello, my name is Sadie Uribe, and I'm the media producer for the Los Angeles Regional SBDC. The SBDC is a national program with over 1,000 locations across the country, helping to stimulate economic growth through business advising and development. The LA SBDC offers no-cost services through funding provided by the U.S. Small Business Administration, SBA, and from the California Office of the Small Business Advocate. It's your tax dollars at work. The Los Angeles Regional SBDC network operates 7 service locations throughout Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. Our services are also offered virtually. We are here to help. We empower small business owners by offering tailored solutions through personalized one-on-one business advising, cutting-edge workshops, and comprehensive programs, all provided at no cost. We are dedicated to supporting your entrepreneurial journey every step of the way. Lori, did you like that one? I call that my in touch with my masculine side reading of the script right there. I felt very manly on that one.
Sadie, I think we got a new career for you. Have you thought of audiobooks?
I can feel it. And then, you can give me some advice on how to, structure my legal company when I'm breaking it in.
Exactly. I've always amazed because I love audiobooks with that like one person that does four different characters and changes their voice accordingly. But I actually had a friend that when audiobooks came out, she was a singer and all this, and she got spare money doing audiobooks. So I've always thought that would be interesting to do. But I think that's your new calling. You can do audiobooks someday. How's that? We're just going to brand you with a new job here.
You know what? Everyone witnessed my one-on-one business consultation.
Yeah, there you go. Hello, everybody. Welcome so much. We're going to have another great show. Let's go ahead and get started here. And Sadie and I were just talking. Can you believe May's around the corner? Does anybody know where time is going? Because I sure don't. And some of you guys are or have kids out on spring break right now, I would assume. So I know when it comes that time, we have less numbers because everybody's out having fun, which is what you should be doing. Okay, I got the financial literacy series scheduled for May. Finally got caught up on that. Did not yet schedule the one where I go over legal structures and tax advantages. We'll be doing that soon. Sadie and I are still doing on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 11 o'clock the webinars for the fire resources, mostly going over the SBA loan process and if anyone gets denials and answer specific questions on that. So do jump into those if you have any specific questions, especially about the SBA loan process, which the EIDL, Idle Economic Injury, is still available for applications of those in the disaster area. So if you want more information, find that out on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Now, next week we have Marcella coming up from Majestic Bliss Soaps. And as I mentioned, I met both Marcella and Elizabeth due to the fact that they are fire victims and we were going over the SBA loans. But in that, I got to hear two really fascinating stories. Marcella and her husband started Majestic Bliss Soaps, I think it's 7 years ago. And when I first was helping them, I was learning all about their company. And as I was learning, I was like, this is a fantastic story. Then when I went on their website and learned about how they started the company in their garage, it's a heartwarming story. And I'm hoping both of them will be on the show because they are just darling together. So pretty excited about that next week. And then Elizabeth has Body Language LA, and she is acupuncturist, I think it is. I've talked to so many people, my mind went blank to see if that's what it is, but I believe it's an acupuncturist. I might be a little bit wrong on that, but she's in the healing, and she has a company. It's a service-based company. She's been at it for some time, and not only did she have a very vibrant personality, which knew would be great for the show, but she has a lot of insight on how to start your own company, sell your services, etc. So I know a lot of you out there are doing service businesses. We see more of that than we do the products, and therefore I thought she would be great to come on the show as well. Okay, for my information on, I thought since we're talking about tax strategies today, I thought I would start out with my important info, my words of wisdom. So, taxpayers who miss the April tax filing deadline should file as soon as possible. Now, although those sound like those are my words and it's good advice, those are actually words from the IRS because I get all of these notices from the IRS all the time being an enrolled agent. So, what I wanted to mention is because I've talked with many people and they have not yet filed nor filed an extension. But before I make these words, I want to let you know that if you are in the fire area, there is an extension already in place till October. So I'm only speaking to those that are not in the fire disaster area who maybe did not file on their April 15th deadline and did not are required to do so or did not file an extension. That was the other thing I wanted to say. So if you go to this website, which of course Sadie put it in the chat for you, you will be able to file the extension on your behalf. Am I saying everybody should file extensions on their own? No, no. I am, and I always say that when you have a company, a sole props included, I always advise that you have a CPA or an EA assist you with the tax filing. I know like TurboTax and all that, that's great when you're a W-2 because there's really not a whole lot of thought. You put in the numbers and the TurboTax or any kind of other type of software, works fine. But when you have a company, you have questions on deductions, you have the home office and all these other things that require some knowledge, and I always suggest it is best to hire somebody to assist you with that. With that being said, I run into a lot of situations with small companies where they hadn't done anything yet, they hadn't filed the extension, and a lot of the tax preparers are still swamped and they can't get on their books, if you will, right? And so in that case, I say a lot of times, even though I'm not saying H&R Block or anything like that is the best long-term strategy, you can usually find somebody to help you immediately. They can get an extension filed, or you can do the extension on your own. And that's why I'm providing you this website and kind of doing a shout out. Now, keep in mind, just because you file an extension does not mean you file an extension on any payments you need to make. You're just filing an extension on the filings of the forms. And it's a really important thing to understand because a lot of times I hear from people that didn't file. And one thing I learned when going through my enrolled agent is that it's more penalties or higher penalties, I should say, for not to file than not to pay. So it's better off to file. And if you can't pay, make out a plan or something, but at least get that filing. So we're going to get into a whole lot more about tax and different things about tax in a minute. So I will just leave it at that. So with it, I want to first say that our guest, for those of you guys that love Dahlia, I know a lot of you out there are great big fans of Dahlia. Tonya, who we're going to meet in a minute, was referred by Dahlia. And anytime Dahlia says, I think somebody'd be great for the show, I'm like, I'm in, absolutely in. So Tonya Kelly is a tax strategist and staff accountant with 20 plus years of experience. She is dedicated to empowering entrepreneurs. I love that part. I do. She specializes in helping real estate investors and business owners conquer their tax fears. Okay. Yeah. Tax fears. We're definitely at the time of the year to discuss that. Optimize deductions and build financial confidence. By making taxes simple and strategic, she enables clients to take control of their financial future. Her company is WA Solutions, an accounting and tax firm focused on transforming individuals and businesses about their finances and taxes, empowering them to manage their money more effectively. Her company specializes in tax strategies. Tonya, welcome to the show. First time guest on the show. So glad to have you here. Hope you'll have to unmute yourself. The system always mutes you.
Good morning. Thank you.
How are you today?
Good. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. So I always like asking this question to everybody, but it's always interesting when people are in anything finance. Did you know from the time you were a kid, this is what you wanted to do for a living? Was this like your parents did it and this is what you saw as your vision? Tell us the story. How did you get into what you're doing now?
I think I did know early on as a child. I always loved numbers, and I was always curious about briefcases. I saw people coming to my grandmother's house, and it was the insurance man though, but he did like taxes, insurance, and everything. And I was like, wow, that briefcase is really important. But for me, and I love numbers though. I figured that was the way to learn about money in taxes, numbers, period.
Yeah, you know what's really funny when you say that? It brought back a memory when, we played dolls as kids, right? For some reason, I had it in my head, I wanted a briefcase. I just thought the briefcase was so cool,
Yeah.
right? So I couldn't play the little game with wanting a briefcase, right?
Right.
So I had this, and I think about this as a kid. The way that I played the game was I had my little doll, right? But I left the doll with the other people, right, to babysit while I took my briefcase off to work and while they played mom. So,
Right.
and I never had kids. So I obviously knew that briefcases were going to be my life. So when you said briefcases, I thought back to that. That's so hilarious. So were you always in your own company? Have you worked with other people? Give us a little feel for the background and the progression of where you went and where you went to school and how that all came about.
Well, I went to a HBCU, Norfolk State. Go green and gold. So then I always worked for corporate. Started out APAR, worked for corporate, doing the staff accountant, financial analyst. But during the meantime, I always did taxes for someone.
Okay.
So I learned how to do taxes through CPAs, H&R Block, as you mentioned. I think I took the test there, the course. Then it was live. However, though, I always graduated into more complex returns. But however, I seen there was a piece missing, that the education.
Yeah.
So that's why I started for my company, because people were like, oh, I just did it because somebody told me, but that's not always the case. I mean, you need to know the end result of that. So I just figured people needed more education around taxes because we don't teach it.
We don't. And Tanya, let's delve into that a bit. A couple things that I want our audience to understand. When it comes time to their financials in general, so that's kind of my soapbox, but especially the tax returns, and
Mhm.
and you may see this as well, is that when the tax preparer hands them the document, they sign and all they want to know is whether they owe or how much they're getting. And I explained to them, and I'm going to go a little bit on this and let you comment on it. I explained to them that whatever's on that tax return, it's their responsibility. They're signing their name and they need to be aware of it. And I'm finding it even more concerning
Mhm.
because a lot of people are downloading their data from the QuickBooks, from the bank statement. Dahlia and I talk about this all the time without
Mhm.
having somebody look at the numbers. And then the tax person often doesn't look at the numbers and then they sign the tax return. And before you know it, they're finding from the IRS something and they go, I didn't know about that. So I think that if you're going to get more into doing your own accounting and everything, it always was important. In other words, if you're with a big corporation, you got somebody on staff to do that.
Right.
You don't with a small company. So talk a little bit about what you've experienced on and anywhere you want to go about what I just said. You can relate or anything. Go, you take it from there.
Okay, thanks, Laura. So yes, I definitely can relate, because what I tell people, you can't deduct what you don't document. And just because QuickBooks downloads now, of course, is AI friendly, doesn't mean it's always correct.
Right.
Depending on how how your chart of accounts is set up in QuickBooks, it could be wrong. You do
Right.
sometimes need a review of QuickBooks. And also I feel like once you say, oh, people go, oh, same as last year, nothing is the same as last year, because
Hmm.
either you don't have it anymore or the expense could increase, or the
Right.
service. So I do tell people, like, review QuickBooks. And if you don't have someone to do you're doing your own QuickBooks, you definitely need someone else to review it before you send it off for taxes. Because all they're going to do is just, okay, they don't have any knowledge of the background. It's just input what you have.
And
So,
that's an important thing, Tanya, that you just said that I want to stress is, when I talk with small companies, they have a belief, almost a false security, if you will, that the tax person, if there's any mistakes on the QuickBooks, will question it. Yeah, thank you she just answered it, guys, right? She just answered it. And I really try to explain to them, no, they're really just taking the data because when you look at the revenue, they don't know. They have no relationship with the company. And where I saw it really in horrific ways, if you will, is during COVID when people got grants and they put it in revenue and then suddenly they paid taxes. Right? Because nobody looked at, and I had one that was like 40,000. I was like, well, your revenue went up by 40,000. They go, no, it didn't. I go, well, it says so on your tax return. They didn't look at their tax return. So, that's the key is to understand that the tax person is not auditing your numbers. If
Right,
something jumps at them, maybe, but
right.
chances are
No,
not.
no, no. And that's why I say know your numbers because your numbers tell a story. So when you reviewing year over year, if you say like it jumped like 40,000, you don't know, go back and look at it before you send it off. I know it's easier said than done because most people are last minute getting it sent off, but just have some pay to have someone to review it. It could save you thousands of dollars in the long run.
Yeah, and the other thing that I notice is that the tax individuals don't look at or don't concern themselves with the client's balance sheet. So to our audience, why I'm saying this, guys, is the balance sheet, even if you don't have accounts receivables where people owe you money, clients owe you, or accounts receivables pay or payables, I mean, because you paid up the bills, a lot of things such as your retained earnings and your common stock, something I saw yesterday in the issue, and the bank account balance. I see people have balance sheets that have a negative bank account, which it's a counting issue, right? And
Right.
I don't see the CPAs or the EAs picking up on that either. So when they do the taxes, what are they doing, Tanya? How much are they being involved with the numbers? And Tanya, is it specific to each tax preparer? Do some get more hands-on, others just do data? Can we walk through that with a little bit of a undertone about what somebody should look for when they hire somebody to do their taxes? So I just gave you a whole lot. If
Yeah.
just run with that, okay?
Hey, no worries. Thank you. So I'm gonna go with first what they should look for. And then just insert some things what I look for as well, or I do. So first of all, make sure you get someone not just open for tax season that's been open all year round. Because a lot of times you find in people, oh, I went to where my cousin went, but that person is gone after April 15th, and you have a letter and you can't reach them anymore. So
Yeah,
that's important. You get someone that's stable, number one, that's been that that can do the what you're expecting them to do, not just someone who does it fly by night.
right.
So, and then two, most tax preparers, so that's why I say it's a difference. Tax preparers just input. Tax strategist or someone who's really hands-on, especially the businesses, look like ask you questions like what is your goal? What where are you looking to go? Especially if you're a sole prop LLC and you looking to move to the next level, like explain to them what's the difference and what will happen as far as taxes because people don't know. People go to YouTube University or Google and they say, "Oh, I'm going to be a S corp." But you have no documentation. And like I said, again, document, especially for those who are in businesses. It's a consequence for not having the documentation. You're missing deductions. You're missing, you're leaving money on the table, or you're not in compliance. And if you live in California like I do, it's an $800 fee a year to operate your business. So I would get someone, ask them questions. Have they worked with my type of industry before? And then have them review whether they're doing your bookkeeping or not, have them review your chart of accounts because all chart of accounts are not the same for every business. Yes, you have your income and your expenses, but you may have other things. A beauty salon may have something a real estate investor doesn't have, in the chart of accounts. It's important to ask questions. That's why I tell people make sure you're getting your questions answered as well before you decided to move forward with someone.
Yeah, and in that, I think let's say this way, I am always stressing to the client, in this case, it'd be the client of the tax person,
Mhm.
to take an active, more aggressive. I say aggressive because they're always meek. They don't want to
Mhm.
ask anything. So I don't mean them being, aggressive, but take
Right.
an active role, proactive, and say, can you review my documents? Is there anything you see on my QuickBooks? Do you look at my balance sheet? And start asking those questions. They tend to be more, okay, here they throw it away and then they are afraid to ask questions. And if the tax person speaks in a language they don't understand, they get even more concerned to ask a question. Have you noticed that where people don't want to take that power back and question? They almost see them like an authority and they don't question them.
Oh, for sure. All the time. I said, why did this go? They like, oh, I don't know. That's what they told me. But
Yeah.
the more questions you ask, the better they can help you. And that being said is because things go through all the time, you're not sure what happened, but in the end, the letter is coming addressed to you.
Yeah.
And if you can't explain it, or like I said, if they're not in business anymore, you can't find them, the next person has to try to figure it all out, and it's not fair to that person because they don't know what happened. So you should know and own your numbers as
Yep.
well.
And
Not
the
everything, but
other,
just know where it came from.
see, and the other thing I hear people say all the time, and I'm just wanting to get some confusables, if I can call that out, so we understand what tax people do, what they don't do, and then we're going to get into some tax strategies. So I run into situations where someone did not pay the $800 franchise tax fee. They did not, especially do the statement of information every other year. And they
Okay.
say, well, wasn't my tax person supposed to do that? And I explained to them, was upholding your legal structure is not your tax person. Yes, they may handle the $800 because it's on April 15th, right? But they're not keeping up on the statement of information there. So let's make a distinction, if you will. What can you rely on, or what should you get engaged with your tax person versus your bookkeeper versus, your legal structure? So people have some clarity because they're just literally a little confused on the blurring of the lines, if you will,
Mhm.
Tonya.
Okay, that's a perfect question to ask. So regarding that, I would say depending on what your contract says, because and a lot of people don't even sign contracts. Where your engagement letter, I would say that. So it would spell out what will be done, what's on them, and what's on you. But if you want to include those things, and that's fine. They will be more than happy to do that for you. But make sure you ask. Don't assume, because tax prep, people don't realize, is just preparing taxes. The $800, like you say, they can pay it within because it's right around April 15th. If, however, the statement of information that's due every other year, if they didn't set up your corporation, they don't know when money is due. So you need to ask these things. That's why I said the more questions you ask, the better they can help you. And that goes into more like tax advisory, I would say,
Right.
setting up, your strategies for those. I know people don't have time to do those. It can be time consuming, but people don't realize it's a back end to the business. Just to operate the business is a business as well, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
a long short of that, it depends on what you ask them to do, and they can put it in an engagement letter of what you're responsible for and what they're responsible for. And I tell my clients that is, you go something you negotiate up front. So we'll have a better understanding of what the scope of work is.
And I love that you said negotiate up front. And guys, in case you haven't noticed, what I'm trying to do is right about now, some people are saying, oh my God, I had a terrible time with my tax person. I didn't understand.
Yeah.
And now is the time to start looking and interviewing, not right before tax. So what I'm doing
Right.
is I'm flushing out interview things for when you interview a tax person. And so another thing I always tell them, Tonya, is when they're interviewing, ask the tax person if they do business tax returns and well, they do and personal, but do they focus on business or personal, and what percentage of the client base has a business? And Tonya, the reason I do that is I'm trying to, you probably know what I'm doing. I'm trying to get them away from having the one who does personal taxes that does one Schedule C because one of their clients has a business. Because I explained to them that tax people tend to focus on either doing personal returns or doing business returns and then doing the personal for the people who have a business. And there's a distinction between the two. And so that's a very important thing to understand is, are they familiar with business tax returns? That's one of the things I always tell people to interview. Your thoughts on that and any other interview questions they should be asking now if they're looking for somebody new for next year?
Oh, yes. I would say if you can get one person to do both. And then when they ask you what's your people call and they say, "Oh, I need my business taxes done," but they are LLC or sole prop.
Right.
They don't understand that's in the personal return on the Schedule C. So first know what you need and then negotiate then going forward. So business taxes, 1065s, 1120s, even 1041s, make sure you are giving them what you need in the proper documentation because people don't understand those are all different returns from your personal, but some of that may flow into your personal return depending on what it is and how you're set up. So I would just make sure be like, hey, whatever your industry is, make sure you let them know your industry, how your what your industry structure is, and can they help you moving forward,
Yep.
not just for one season. And I would tell clients not just to keep business, but if you have someone you like doing your taxes that are doing your tax, stick with them for at least 2 or 3 years because they give you things to do, strategies to do, and they don't work just in an instant. You have to work the plan.
Let's talk about that now, Tanya. We've used this word before, and most in the audience may have not been familiar or go around talking or their tax person talk about tax strategies, right? And so they don't even quite, when I think they think a tax strategy, many in the audience, you can tell me in the chat if you feel like this is you, think, oh, well, that's for the millionaires with a tax strategy, right? But that's not so. As I even tell people that if you owe just a little and you put it in a 401, that's money you're not going to have to pay. So tax strategies are for everyone, including ones that owe money and or
Right.
don't make money. Tax strategy are
Right.
across the board. So let's first explain what do you mean when you say tax strategy? What does that mean exactly?
Well, for me, what it means is I would say, I say, hey, what's your goal? What's your goal? Everybody know what's your goal. And then based on your goal, we will back into a strategy to help you get there.
What would
And
be an example of a goal? Like, invest in new equipment, build the company. What would be
right,
child education? Is that what you mean when you say goal?
right. What's your business goal? And I tell them take money off the table because we know you in business to make money. Like, are you planning on expanding? Or like you say, buying new equipment. But first of all, you need to have your financials in order, know your numbers, and then we back into the of how we can get there. Because you may say, oh, I'm paying you paid last year, 30K in taxes. And then we may look at it, be like, oh, now it's time maybe you to move up to an S corp, or maybe it's time for you don't have your SEP set in place, your self-employment 401K, give money there, or non. There's different things we can do based on your situation. Every strategy is different. Because you tell me your strategy is to buy more real estate next year, then we'll have a different strategy for the person who's just trying to send their kid to college.
And this is true and talks to what we were talking about YouTube, where so many people go and they figure out they watch some kind of second thing about, well, you should be an S corp because it saves you money, and then I try to explain to them your net income's not high enough, it's actually costing you money, and now you're committed for 5 years. That happens all the time. So one of the thing I want to emphasize to guys is there's a complexity in these decisions. It's not like you have to look at the personals, you have to look at the goals, you have to look at what the business is doing, what the business will be doing. Deciding to do these things isn't within 1 second or a YouTube. And there is repercussions when you get involved in these structures long term, very much so. What do you see if you were to kind of say, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here, Tanya, on thought process, but what would you see are the mistakes that that clients are making? And I'll just let you go anywhere. If you were to say, okay, here's the top 5 things, don't do these at home, guys. What are they?
I would say becoming a S corp too early
Oh my God, that's my number one. Thank you, Tanya.
because regardless whether you are LLC paying self-employment, now you have payroll taxes,
Yep,
but there's so many guidelines you must follow.
yep.
And I tell people document, 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 and then you have your minutes. Now you have to become a minute. You got to get a board, and if you don't, if you're not good at that, you may not be good at keeping up with your S corp requirements. And then I would say is not taking all your deductions, and that's because you don't have proper accounting system. You
Right.
just putting it on a piece of paper.
Give us an
Yeah.
example of that so they can get their teeth into it, if you will. What would be an example of somebody not taking a deduction because they didn't have it properly documented?
Well, a prime example is mileage.
I was thinking mileage before you
Mileage
said it.
is big, and
Talk
mileage.
about mileage so they understand what they should be doing and how mileage works, because I get this all the time, Tanya. I put the car in my business name, so that means it's all of a deduction because I put it in the business name, right? Yeah, no.
No,
Talk
no,
about
no.
mileage. Let's talk
Yeah,
about mileage and car use.
mileage. I'm not gonna say name of apps, but I'm gonna say get a good app.
Okay.
And there's top 3 apps out there. They will cost you a little money a month, but it's gonna save you money in the long run. So I'm just gonna give a high level example. So say the average people drive 12 to 15,000 miles a year. However, maybe 5,000 is business miles only. So you have to subtract out your personal from your business, and then you will put that account that for on your return. But remember, if you're taking mileage, then you got to make sure, like, go back from January to December. That's why I say get an app, because you can't remember where you went last week, let alone January. So therefore, mileage is a big one because we don't want to do the work up front. And
Or
so,
make up for it when you have to.
right, right. And mileage is 70 cents a mile this year.
Wow,
That's a
that's gone
lot.
up. Yes, it really
A
has.
lot.
While we're talking about mileage, let's go even more into it. So, say I have a business and I'm using my car maybe 20-30% of the time just to get an idea. Other than mileage, do I get to deduct my oil changes? Do I get to deduct wear and tear on my tires in general? To explain how that works too, because people get confused on that.
Okay. I would say only you take the standard or you take the mileage. And yes, you can write off the depreciation of your vehicle. Say if you got a Honda, whatever, and you would write that off for the 5 to 7 years, whatever, you would get the depreciation of the car. But no, not the oil change and all the tires if you're taking mileage. You take one or the other. And I
Yeah.
tell people, it's now that mileage is almost 70 cents a dollar, take mileage. Just keep track of your mileage, because I
Yeah.
mean, oil change, it depending on, be reasonable with your mileage, because just that's why I say get the app and be reasonable. Especially people with DoorDash and Uber, they miss mileage because when they give you your mileage on the end of the year, they only give your on miles mileage. So you have to keep track in between that it took you to get to your destination as well. So mileage is big. That's a big one.
Yeah,
Uh,
and a lot of people don't realize that, like I said, they literally think that because their car is being used for business, that they can write it off as a complete business deduction and they don't get it. I remember going for my EA, they were speaking about the only kind of vehicles that could be used as a 100% deduction. And they were basically explaining it. I'm paraphrasing here, Tanya, so you
mhm.
correct me, but it was like that it has to be able to not be used for anything other than business. And they use like an ambulance or a fire truck. You're not going to take that to the
Right,
grocery
right,
store, right? Other
right.
than that, it's usage. So, like I said, there's this belief like, oh, should I write off my car under the business? I'm like, it doesn't work that way.
Right. No, no.
Yeah.
I think that's where you sit down with your accountant or your tax person and say, "Hey, I do, drive." Like, say a realtor or someone does delivery. They do drive for a living, and make sure you get an accurate count of your mileage, and they should be able to walk you through the process. And like I say, it's set up in the beginning, but once it's set up, you'll be fine in December. You won't be scrambling in April trying to figure out what your mileage was last year, the previous
Yeah.
year.
That's perfect. Now, Rachel asked if you're attending like a webinar or training and you're driving to that mileage, is that deductible as well?
Um, you're driving.
to the training or a
to-
webinar. Well, not a webinar. You wouldn't be attending a webinar.
yeah,
So
I was about to say,
when I
wait a
first
minute.
didn't even catch that. I'm so used to
I'm
it.
like, wait.
Yeah, okay, I'm attending. I'm driving to the webinar. Well, wait, Rachel's driving to the coffee shop to have the webinar.
Right. Okay. So yes, that can be depending on where you're coming from now. So just make sure you get the mileage. If you're coming from home to the thing to the webinar, yes. And then I don't want to get too technical because it's your home base. You know, you may have to subtract out some miles depending on where your home base is.
It
So
gets complicated from there
it
because
gets complicated.
yeah, they don't want you to get money to go from home to,
Boom.
like to
Right.
work and stuff. So it's
Right.
you got to figure out, okay, this is the average of what I would, it gets, see, and
Right.
I want to make a moment to take a plug here. This, guys, is why I'm saying don't do TurboTax if you have a
Right.
company. This is why I'm saying that. Okay, while we're going down this like rabbit hole, I know, Tanya, I'm going to throw you a rabbit hole. You're going to go, oh, Lori, oh, Lori. Okay, people have misconceptions about the home office. So this is what I always tell them. Yes, consider the home office, but it's much more mathematically calculated than you understand it to be. And there's once again two choices, and I don't get into the details of it, but they got this feeling like, well, if I do this, if I pay my rent through the business, does that mean I get to deduct it all? And it doesn't work that way. Yeah, it doesn't work that way either. So let's just touch a little bit on the home office usage. And also, and you tell me if you would, kind of be okay with me saying it. It's a red flag with the IRS. So you don't
It
want to
is.
go. Yeah,
I
okay,
was
you
about
okay
to
with
say
me
that.
saying
I was
that?
about
Okay. Yeah, continue with then. You take
so
over.
I'm gonna just touch on it a little bit. Just home office use. Make sure, first of all, you know the full square footage of your place, your home, and then your square footage of what you're using for an office. And it calculates a percentage of that small percent. You may have a room, one room for office. I'm assuming most of us just have a one room office, and then it calculates a percentage of that. But like Lori stated, that is the red flag, red flag, red flag. So highly. So there's other ways to compensate. Some people only save $300. Is it really worth it? You can save $300 somewhere else. So I would just make sure if you're using that, make sure you're calculating the square footage of your home correctly and your business office use correctly.
Yep, I agree. I just thought of a really big elephant in the room, Tanya, and I just thought of it. Dahlia's out there, I know, because Dahlia's got like this is one I talk to Dahlia about all the time.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
okay, this is one that you might go, okay, I'm not sure what you're talking about, but this is one I just had Dahlia on to talk about. This is, and they go by different words, but they're called these merchant loans, and it's where the merchants are taking out a portion of the sales. And so what happens is the interest rate doesn't get calculated, the revenue gets dropped because they took back the loan out of the revenue. They then sync with QuickBooks, so it's really not showing all the revenue because the loan payment was taken out before it goes in the bank account, right? So it's then understating revenue, not showing any interest on the loans. And I'm seeing it in two ways. I'm seeing it when somebody wants to go for refinance. They're saying, I'm paying all the high interest on the loans, but it doesn't show on their tax return. So they're like, no, you're not. You're not showing it. And it's understating the revenue. Are you running into that, or do you just see the numbers and probably don't even know that it's happening? That's what I think's happening is taxpayers see it, taxpayers see it, but they don't know they're using a merchant loan and it's taken out of out of their bank account.
Well, that goes back to asking questions. Yes, and that is most common with small vendors, and even some people who just didn't even know how it worked.
Yeah.
So just these type of loans, yes. So I tell people that's why I ask questions. Where's your revenue source? Where's it come? Do you have any of these merchant loans? Because they do. You're right. They do take it out first, and it's not broken out into revenue or what you pay in interest. So you're
Right.
missing that deduction, and you understating your income. But no one will know that unless you speak up. That's why I say don't be afraid to ask questions, and maybe they can even help you get a better loan by you showing more on your income stream or revenue.
Right. That's
You
another
know?
thing, 'cause
And
out of
then you can maybe refinance out of this loan to a more traditional loan. You know, I call them like payday loans, really, for business.
I almost said payday loans because they
Yeah,
really. And I think also, and I'm going to take another jump on this, Tanya. I feel as though what we're talking about, guys, with these payments and merchants is becoming more and more important as the IRS is changing the rules with like PayPal and not Zelly, but Vimo, where they're sending a 1099K if it's now, isn't it 5,000? Am I remembering correctly? Yeah, 5,000. So what I'm saying, guys, is if you use one of those payroll processors, the IRS now is requiring them to send to the IRS a 1099K saying, look, Sally brought in 10,000 on PayPal. Oops, Sally only shows 5,000 on the tax returns. And if you're using the PayPal for personal as well, you've got to separate that. I think this is a little bit of a complication and potential downfall for small companies not documenting. Can you comment on this? And I hopefully everybody in the audience even understood what I was just saying.
right. Right. So actually, yeah, me and Daya was talking about this last week. These The more sources you have feeding into your QuickBooks, the more you have to reconcile. So PayPal, I'm gonna just say PayPal is just, you need to reconcile it to zero every month. And then, yes, PayPal is a source for you. However, you have to make sure you're reconciling it, because you'll be understating or overstating your expenses if you don't, because the money should flow in and flow out to somewhere. And regarding the payday loans with them, when you get to 1099K, you can be double counting because it already should have been reconciled in your QuickBooks. Because if I received this money January through December, I should have already accounted for. What that is showing, you should make sure that you show the same as well.
Yeah.
Because some people can, if they don't realize it, we actually had this decision, this same thing with a colleague of mine. She was like, "Oh my God, I didn't put this in," but it should have already been inputted during the months throughout the year. It's just a FYI at that point. But however, you have to make sure you're reconciling that account every month, feeding it into your QuickBooks, because it's a lot goes on with all these. The more you have to feed into QuickBooks, the more you have to reconcile, and
Yeah.
it gets confusing if you don't know what you're doing.
It really, really does. And I always say to everybody that there is no such thing as a small business anymore. And what I mean, and you understand, people are like, what do you mean, Laura? There's a lot of small businesses because of the way we use invoicing, we use PayPal, we use Venmo, we do all of these different types of exchange, and then we have these different loans. You now have very complicated accounting systems and somebody who's just making soap and selling it at the farmer's market. And so it really does require this advanced knowledge. And it goes back to the fact that for many people, when they meet with their tax person, they're not having a dialogue. They're not
Right.
having a dialogue. They're just
Not
taking
no.
their numbers and they're not catching this. So as we come into this section, I want to talk about tax strategies, but I want people to understand, kind of give us a narrative of what it's like working with you. Would you have a conversation with me? Would I just hand you the documents? Would you have a meeting before? Would you have a meeting after? That way people have something to compare to. Well, my tax person just took my documents. We didn't have this kind of meeting. So talk about your processes of working with clients so they can understand what it looks like.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So first of all, I want to say again, it goes back to what's your goal. So yes, I will meet with you before, especially if you're a new client. We will meet before, discuss your needs and your goals, because I think that's so important. And discuss expectation. So, and then we go from there. Once we may go back and forth dialogue. I like to keep everything in email for the questions,
Yeah.
because if they're missing something, and I do like to get the prior year return, the last year filed, so I could see what may be missing, or why don't why, what happened this year or what happened that year. And also, I will have them sign a 8821 to pull their transcripts just in case they don't even know what you
Oh,
have.
that's nice. That's nice. That's awesome that you do that. Yes.
Yes, because what I find, people move, people don't even know they had a document, and it becomes like, oh, okay, now I have to do amend it. But then
So
do
guys, what she's saying, so you follow, is she's saying if you don't have your last recent tax return from the prior year, she has you fill out a form which then requests from the IRS to be sent to her so she can review it to make sure everything's identify any changes. I've
right.
never heard a tax person actually go that extra step to do that. I just wanted everybody to understand what that meant.
Right. And then we will have dialogue regarding your return once it's finished. And you check, like, the basics, name, social, whatever. But then we go into the details of how the numbers arrive. Because some people are so fixate on the revenue, like, oh, I made X amount, I made 200,000, but no, how much are you keeping? That's the thing, you know. So then we go, like, I'll just do high level and then explain some concepts, and then ask them if they have questions, and then send it to them for review again. And then once after that, we will begin to plan for the following year based on what they told me. Because I would give them, like, what they need to be doing, or what they miss, expenses they could have missed, or some deductions they could be taking this year. Because that's so important. When you're in business, your job is to stay in business and make money. But however, put your money to better use for you, for you and your goal. Because
Yeah.
a lot of companies are paying, businesses are paying these loans, and they don't realize they may have a better option if their finances in order. And that's why I say get faithful with your finances.
Yep. And I'm so glad you mentioned that about revenue. My everybody knows me. I have this famous thing where I go, "Well, can you buy a quart of milk with that?" And I'm like, "You don't buy a quart of milk with revenue. You buy a quart of milk with net income." And
Right.
so many
I
people
like
say,
that.
I made this." And I'm like, "No, you sold this amount, then you paid the expenses, and you didn't actually make anything." That's usually the
Right.
conversation I have. And I'm
Yeah.
like, but I always just come to, "Can you buy a quart of milk with that?" That's like my statement all the time. But yeah. So in that, in going with tax strategies, and I'm going to take on something that I saw Nina wrote. I'm going to read Nina because Nina made such a great statement. So even though taxes is filed once a year, you should prepare for it all year. Yes, Nina.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that, Tanya, because I think that feeds into tax strategies.
Mhm.
So run with, what is it that companies should be doing throughout the year to start planning, and what tax strategies are then perhaps engaged in?
Well, great question, Nina. That I would definitely say yes. Tax season again is just for a season, but tax planning is all year. So, like, now, I would say if you didn't like your results, or from April, from this past 2024, now it's time to prepare it. How can I save money? How can I get uh make sure I'm documenting my deductions? Now is that time to drill down and, like, say, hey, what about this, or what about that? So we will work collaborating together, and I would say, hey, I suggest ABC. And then they may say, well, I only can do C and D. And then that's fine. We'll work through on that throughout the year. And I forgot to say, we will meet 2 or 3 times throughout the year, because you can't just meet with your accountant one time a year and expect
No.
magic to happen. We need to know where you are at any given point in life, because there's different deadlines throughout the year, whether you know it or not. It's not just taxes on
Right.
April 15th. There's other different deadlines. So basically, we get you in line, and get a system in place of how to report things and do things like that. And then once April 15th, it'll be a breeze. You don't have to worry, because
And
your
that is
numbers
so
are
true.
in order.
And so many people just think about taxes
Mhm.
based on, let me get in right in April and do an April 15th. And then you don't have options, and they don't realize that even taking out loans or making certain choices, there's different tax treatments to those,
Right.
and they could play into the decision a bit more as well.
Right, right. And I agree. And I say tax planning too helps you make better decisions throughout the year. Because I don't want people to say, "Oh my God," be so cringe about taxes that they're not growing their business or they're not operating efficiently because of taxes. You know, there are other ways. That's why you plan. That's why it's called planning, tax planning throughout the year.
And another thing I'm seeing a lot of, Tanya, and we talked about this a little bit before the show, and a little bit to my surprise, I have to say. So this is just because through the SBDC, I see so many people, I get to kind of see what's happening out in the marketplace, if you
Yeah.
will. I am seeing a large amount of individuals who start, smaller companies. They're selling something online, they're going to a farmer's market, good companies. I'm not saying anything on that level, but they just don't have the respect and responsibility of understanding that they have to keep up with things. And they say things to me like, well, I just didn't file my taxes yet. Yeah, and I'm like, no, and they say it to me kind of like, I haven't
Yeah.
seen that movie yet. I'm like, it's in the same vein of thought. And I'm like, well, when did you file your taxes? Well, I've been really busy and I got behind in a couple years, but I didn't really make money, so it doesn't matter that I didn't file the taxes. Please talk to this because I'm seeing it much too often now.
Yes. Yeah, that is a great point. Yes. So believe it or not, even if your company did make a net profit or money, you need to file for informational purpose. Because
Yeah.
once you get that EIN, that's like your social. They're looking for that for federal and state. So just stay in compliance because even if you don't file so many years, they'll file for you. And
Yeah.
and once that's happened, they'll just say you owe X amount of dollars based on what they know, not based on your story. So if your accountant tells you don't need to file, you don't make any money, make sure you ask them why. Make sure you question that because everyone needs to file
Yeah. Yep.
regardless.
And I noticed that IRS, because being an EA once again, they're really into right now promoting their new, I don't know if we call it their software or whatever, but their e-file that they're now
Right.
doing. You can file for free. Now, if it's a W-2, I can see that, I can see
Yeah.
that. But for companies, they're really trying to even push it for companies. And I don't know why the IRS is like trying to push out to the small businesses. Here, you can file your own taxes with IRS for free. Have you noticed that as well?
I think they were trying to, the tool was supposed to come out a couple years ago and they finally got it going. So I think they're trying to just make sure everybody files electronically,
Yeah.
because no more paper returns. They're trying to do away with that. But I would advise people to work with someone because I haven't been on the site for business or individuals, but I would advise you to file your own taxes because if you don't know where the number goes or what to do with the number, if you don't put it in, it's not to your benefit.
Right, right, right. And I also see people use different software and then they don't get a hard copy of the taxes.
Mhm.
I've seen that as well. Yeah, and I haven't been on the site either, but I had noticed that they were pushing for that a lot. Also another thing for people to understand, you mentioned at the beginning is the $800 franchise tax fee. And I hear people all the time that say this, well, I opened my LLC, but I didn't do anything with it, so I don't owe the $800.
Yes, you do owe the $800. It's California now. I'm speaking only California's
Right.
800. It's one of the highest states. I believe
Yeah.
it is the highest.
It is
But
the highest, and it's not the highest by a little. It's like the other ones are like $35, $25. I haven't even seen one go over $50 so far.
right.
Then it's like, okay, and then it goes up to $800. Yeah. And the California website, it literally says for the privilege of being
Yes.
incorporated with it literally says that. So yeah, that's your privilege to pay the 800. While we're talking on this, I know it goes more towards the legal side of things, but I am always telling people that are just starting out, they're dabbling their toes, they're doing something like making scrubs, sell them someplace, just operate as a sole prop. Do not jump on an LLC. Tanya, okay, and I'm gonna, make my last soapbox thing and send it your way because I've always talked to it from a legal perspective, but I'm gonna have you talk from a tax. I believe it's my personal opinion that companies like LegalZoom and social media are pushing these small companies, these entrepreneurs just starting out. They all believe that the very first thing you do before you even figure out what you're going to do and how you're going to make money is you file an LLC. I have people say to me, like, well, how else would you function? You have to be an LLC. And I looked at reports a long time ago, but like 80% of the companies in the United States are a sole prop. And I've had people
Mhm.
say, well, nobody operates as a sole prop anymore. No, that's not true. So I feel like there should be a marketing campaign for the good old sole prop. And the reason being is it's not getting people engaged in having to pay 800 when they haven't even made 800, and it's not putting them in with all these legal rulings when they really don't need to be. So what's your thoughts about the good old fashioned simple sole prop?
I agree. I believe everyone should, like I said before, there are stepping stones to this. Start with a sole prop because then you don't have to be inundated with all the paperwork and $800 in California. And also, you'll learn your business. You'll learn without being penalized whether you want to do this or not.
Yep.
Because a
Yep.
lot of people they start like with selling masks through the pandemic and making plenty of money, but then now they're not in business anymore. And you
Yep.
don't and believe it or not, it takes time to set up and it takes time to close it properly as well with
Yep.
both federal and state. So I
Yep.
would start with sole prop, and then when you work with your accountant or your tax person, just make sure they understand your goals or how you're trying to move. And then maybe become an LLC once I don't know, you discuss your goals first. But if you know you're doing this short term, stay a sole proprietor and then move forward from there.
Yeah,
Because
yep, and there's so many misconceptions, like even
right,
with the chat, I'll become an LLC when I get tired of getting 1099s. That's not even true. You're
that's
already
not true. You're still gonna
that's
get a
not true. You're still gonna
1099,
1099s. That's not
but
true.
in the company name.
And they're right in the company name. So that's not true. You can't use the same EIN. I mean, like I
No,
said, miss alone. That's why, guys, next week I'll be talking about my legal structures and tax
yeah,
advantage
that's a
webinar
good
coming
one.
out because so many people and they say, they say to me, well, I'm a 1099. I said, well, you just called yourself a form. That's actually just a form filled out. And then they say, well, I'm a independent contractor. I said, well, that's an HR term. You're a sole prop. I'm a gig worker. No, you're a sole prop.
Right.
People operate just not understanding this. And so if we could say one thing we learned today, it's much more complicated than people believe. And I get it too, because when you are one of these companies and you've been, in business for a while, you see this little slice. So you think that that's the truth in all, but it's just the little slice you've been exposed to.
Right, right. I totally agree. And I want to say one more thing about the misconception of LLCs. The if there's only 9 states that have no state tax, but if you live in the state tax, you will still pay your state tax.
Yeah.
You just don't get an LLC somewhere else to avoid state tax.
Oh, I have that happen all the time. Foreign entity doing business.
Right, right.
I always say, you don't want to pay California taxes, get your butt out of California. That's the only way to do it. Literally, I mean, your butt's got to be out of
Right,
California. I
right.
literally mean that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's so
they
much
do that too.
misconception about that.
Yep, yep,
And then I just think people should just make sure, like going back to LegalZoom, like you mentioned in those places, just make sure like you're doing it because you are there. You're there. Don't let nobody pressure you into
right.
being an LLC.
Absolutely, exactly, absolutely. So thank you so much. I know we've been all over the place, but that's what I like to do on the show
I
because what
love
we're
it.
doing is we're touching a piece of everything. And I think my takeaway is that, acknowledging that tax preparation is more complicated for a business than you realize, and you could be missing out on really getting some deductions or getting your tax returns right. Get with a tax person that has conversations like Tanya's expressing. Make sure you got a good tax person and understand when it makes sense to do a legal structure. I always say, I just don't think tax and finance and legal are DIY on YouTube. And I just tell people I actually did a crazy thing 3 months ago. I learned to use my table saw on YouTube. Okay. I'm not against DIY. Okay, look, I did okay, guys. All fingers are still here. Scared the living out of me, but but I just think tax and finance and legal is not DIY.
Mm-mm, no, no, and that's I want to say to that, like during this time of year or beginning of the year to like April, May, people listen to their neighbor and their coworker about their taxes. No two taxes are the same. You can make the same
No,
amount of money even in your business or W-2, but be taxed different due to what your deductions are, what your household is. So don't listen to your neighbor or your coworker.
no, no.
To your tax person. And going back to tax prep, I offer more tax advisory. It's like a step up because basically advising you on certain things, not just plug and play. I'm in it, and that's why I call myself the tax strategist with style, because my style is education. I'm trying to educate you to make better informed decisions about where you based on your goals you told me. So
I
that's
love
what I like to do.
and
Education is the
yep.
key.
Yep. And guys, you know, Dahlia that know, and Dahlia's here. Dahlia,
Yes, shout
we
out to
work
that.
together. You got a team there. You got, because Dahlia talks about educating her clients, educating her clients. And I think that's what's so important. We really, all of us that are in this small business we're experts helping small businesses. We have a responsibility to educate our small businesses so
Yes.
be self-dependent and make good choices. I think it's a responsibility we have.
Yes, I agree. I agree because we saw that in the pandemic. Most people couldn't get a loan because their finances weren't in order. And everybody, small business can be so silo, but we all together. Like I have my team of colleagues, we always converse about different clients of what we would do, what we would not do. So it's okay to ask questions. Everyone doesn't know it all,
Yep.
but
Yep.
ask questions. I advise every small business owner to go back to their tax accountant and ask them questions based on what they told them and why, and how to get a plan together for this year.
Absolutely. Well, Tanya, you're gonna be like Dahlia. I'm gonna have to have you come on again and talk now. Guys, Tanya's information is in the chat. If you're looking for someone to interview, add her to your interview list. I only will have bookkeepers and tax people and stuff come on that I can know that they know what they're doing, because I don't want to, present somebody or have them exposed to the audience if I don't feel like they're
Thank
doing
you.
they're doing a good job for people. So thank you so much for coming
Thank
on
you for this
today.
opportunity. Thank you. Thank you.
I told you it was going to be fun and we were going to have all kinds of conversation.
Yes. I was nervous, but I'm glad we had this time. And thank you, and Sadie, for making me feel welcome. And thank you, audience, for tuning in. And also, I want to say that I do have free discovery calls. So give me go to my website, my link, and schedule a call, and just we can just discover what you're doing. It's free, no obligation.
Awesome. Awesome. There you go. Okay. Well, Sadie, I'm going to bring you back on. You always love to learn things. You learned a lot today, didn't we, Sadie?
So much. I mean, honestly, two. I'm gonna go with two, if I may be so bold. It's you got to start interviewing now in the sense of like why you're. I'm like, oh my God, she's right. Like I thought I was being a nerd, just being like, let me try some new software, some. And I was like, no, like this is when you do. You got to get all your systems, your chart of accounts, and then my other gem is it's called planning, right? Like planning.
Yep, it's so true. It's so true. Well, guys, Sadie is going to stay behind a bit. As always, keep the chat open in case you guys still have conversations that you want to have, and also be sure to grab any links into the chat. I will see everybody next week. Tanya, thank you so much again, and thank you for the frequent flyers that are here every single week. I just love that. And if you are new to the show, please check in next week. Small Biz Talk with your host, Lori Williams. See you next time. Bye, everybody.
All righty, guys. So I launched this survey for you. It's, oh, we got some folks answering our survey over here. So let me know if you need anything. I'm going to be hanging out for a few. I know you guys definitely want to reach out to Tanya. And then the other thing that I want to put in the chat for you guys are Lori's upcoming financial literacy classes. So let me put that in the chat for you. Please let me know if you need anything else. I will be here. I will be on mute, but I'll be here. And this is for Michael. Michael, there will be no additional session for questions. We're kind of just like hanging out now. I know like it just went dark all of a sudden, but if you want to reach out to Tanya, let me put her information back in the chat for you. So if you want to contact Tanya, here's her info right over here. And if you want to reach out to Lori, here is her information. Yeah. So, and then I don't know, maybe you want to reach out to the Small Business Development Center itself. So, if you're not a client yet, definitely do become a client of the SBDC. So, let me give you the information for that as well. But yes, but just in terms of awesome, cool. Let me put that in there for you. Yeah. Okay, cool.